Good morning. It is 8:08 a.m. on Sunday, March 31st, 2019. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. It is Sunday, and so as I do on Sundays when I am able, I am doing a rewatch of the animated Disney show Gravity Falls. Today I'm talking about season 1, episode 18, Land Before Swine, in which Waddles the pig is kidnapped by a pterodactyl. And as an interesting little bit of meta trivia, this is the first episode of Gravity Falls that I ever watched. I had heard good things about the show from people who are tuned into these things. People who said, hey, you like cartoons, right? Well, there's a good one called Gravity Falls you should watch. And so I checked it out. And this was the episode that was on when I first checked it out. And I recall enjoying it, but also feeling like what people had told me about it was this, this rich continuity in it. And so I was figuring that I was maybe not getting everything out of it. And so I didn't actually start then watching the show, just, every week to week. But as I had now been made full aware of the show. Ooh, dog barking in the hallway. As I had been made fully aware of the show, I knew more what I was in for when I later decided to watch the whole thing. And that was years ago still. But this remains the first episode that I ever watched, truly introducing me to the show for the first time. And as things go, I think it's not a bad episode for that. All the characters are pretty much on brand. The mystery is not overcomplicated. And, we got a pretty clear, emotional arc for both the A and B plots, right? So, obviously, one plot is Mabel and Stan and Waddles, and then, of course, the actual adventure itself, where despite loving Mabel, Stan doesn't especially care for Waddles the pig, doesn't take care of him, gets him kidnapped, and then has to rescue him. Good stuff. But then also Dipper and Seuss, and Dipper dealing with Seuss's enthusiasm for helping Dipper in his mystery hunting, but his clumsiness and we could probably go ahead and say stupidity, frequent inability to think things through, perhaps, because he's not dumb exactly. I think if we were to give Seuss D&D type stats, ability scores, it's actually his wisdom that would be very low, not so much his intelligence. But he is very enthusiastic, wants to help, and so Dipper occasionally finds himself in a position of not wanting to hurt Seuss's feelings, but wanting him to kind of stop helping. But I think it's actually nice it's a nice way to tell that story when Dipper is getting more and more frustrated, but ultimately, I don't know, it's a fairly standard way to tell the story, to have, Seuss just randomly come up with some key detail, a very cartoony detail at that, this idea that the pterodactyl, its eyes are so far apart so it can't see in the middle. While technically largely true, the actual ability of them to manage to stay right in that spot is extraordinarily unlikely. Also, the fact that the the way this baby this baby creature attempts to see where they are is by pointing its blind spot at them and not, looking at it with the. So it's all very cartoony, but it's silly, So I just mean as a way to show Seuss helping. I think it's it's good. It's really a lesson for Dipper to be a little bit more accommodating and to appreciate the emotional component of Seuss's support. I think that's not to be overlooked, even though that's not sort of the named quality that it shows Seuss providing. Like this trivia bit or realizing about the creature's eyes, like, is that really what Seuss offers? Well, sure, maybe sometimes, but I think his enthusiasm ultimately is actually what he's bringing to the table. Dipper really cares about solving these mysteries, but, Stan's certainly not interested in helping with that. Mabel is indifferent. Like sometimes she cares, but generally only if it's more interesting to her specifically. But Seuss is there for Dipper. He's a partner in crime. He's a sidekick. That's meaningful, even if sometimes Seuss's more practical contributions are not necessarily all that helpful, especially given things like barging into the darkroom to ruin the photographs in order to proclaim that he has brought victory nachos. For one, victory nachos would actually be a very appreciated thing in many cases, but then revealing that he's actually already eaten all the victory nachos, and so what he has done is he's barged into the darkroom to bring an empty bowl. That's kind of, it's kind of funny as a joke, but I can definitely understand Dipper's frustration there. Although it did occur to me that in theory, the only thing that should have been ruined by that, as we see it on the screen, is the actual print of the photo. And unless Dipper had the negatives still where they could be exposed, then they should have been fine. But, the implication is that the photos are ruined. And so, that's, the thing is with shows like this, you have to take for given what they present, right? Like if Dipper says, oh no, the photos are ruined, like it's not useful to try to get into this idea of like, oh, well, actually, that's not how you would do it or whatever. So I think the other bit of Seuss silliness that I actually really enjoyed in this one was where he goes down to work on something under the car while it's running and almost runs over his own head, and just having a moment of kind of laughing at himself with relief, and then actually having just a split second of the horrified realization of how close that actually really came to killing himself by running over his own head. That one, I don't know. It's silly and simple, but I was amused by it. But so ultimately, I think even though the sort of specific, like surface level lesson that Dipper learns is that sometimes Seuss does know things, and that's helpful. But I feel like the real lesson is not so much that Seuss might sometimes pull out random bits of trivia, but rather that it is his enthusiastic participation and support and emotional and moral support to Dipper that is where Seuss actually shines as a sidekick. But of course, the main plot is with Mabel and Waddles and Stan. We have lots of fun, just silliness with Mabel's enjoying her pet. In when holding a dance party with Waddles, and then of course wanting the this baby carrier that works for pigs. And I say it like that. If you haven't watched the episode recently, it's because I say it like that because the TV commercial for this thing is voice acted by Justin Roiland, who many people may now know from Rick and Morty, even though, when this show came out, Rick and Morty didn't exist yet. But Justin Roiland has a certain type of delivery that is very recognizable, and he's very good for those sorts of really surreal, silly commercials, where TV commercial for a baby carrier, where it's implied that, well, obviously what everybody wants to know is whether you could put a pig in it. And yes, you can. It works for pigs. Feel your pig's heartbeat next to yours. That's all very fun. I like that. And but of course, while going out to get this carrier, that's where Stan has the opportunity to leave Waddles outside, and where Waddles gets kidnapped by the pterodactyl. And if you haven't watched the episode in a while, the reason I'm saying it pterodactyl is because that's a whole thing with Dipper and Seuss. But that just actually reminds me, I think my favorite joke of the episode is Dipper attempting to correct Seuss about the pronunciation of pterodactyl, and Seuss saying, actually, we don't know what it's really, how it's supposed to sound, because there was no one around during dinosaur times. Anyway, I suddenly also just remembered the silliness of Sheriff Bubbs and Deputy Durland in the cold open, where the show is really leaning into the idea of how silly they are now. Of that, first of all, we have Deputy Durland doing a child's maze where he has solved the maze, but then accidentally draws past the finish line to one of the shark, and is dismayed that, oh no, he was so close. and yet Sheriff Blubbs reassures him, don't worry, you don't have to be able to solve mazes for me to enjoy spending time with you. And then when a monster steals the roof of their police car, they're saying, hey, let's enjoy our new convertible. It's all very silly. Where was I? I am dismayed that we were not able to see the Cornicorn in its full glory, a Mystery Shack attraction with a unicorn made out of corn. That seems like I wanted to see that, but alas, because Stan is not taking good care of Waddles, Waddles was wandering around causing trouble, leaves him outside, gets kidnapped, thankfully leaving a trail of red thread, yarn behind from the sweater Mabel was knitting. And that leads everybody to, go after Waddles down into the cave. I think it's interesting and really satisfying that the phony version of the story that Stan tells everybody in order to get out of trouble for leaving Waddles outside, this idea of I was holding Waddles close to me and was stolen right out of my arms, and then I climbed on the dinosaur's back and was punching it in the face, and all of that silly extreme stuff, which is so. First, for Mabel's to believe that is kind of, plot contrivance, I think. But I like that. But what's so satisfying about that is that it comes true by the end. That by the end, Stan is literally using the little baby carrier to carry Waddles close to him and riding the pterodactyl and punching it in the face. And it's great that the extremely silly versions of a story, the lie that Stan tells at, early on to get out of trouble, actually becomes the truth. And I think that's amazing. And then, of course, but we have the whole arc, which is, establish the rules, which is don't leave the pig outside. Stan breaks the rules and the pig is in danger, but he lies about it, making it worse. But then as they're on the adventure, he accidentally reveals the lie, because he's so happy to have found all of these ancient preserved dinosaurs that he's like, oh, I should have left that pig outside years ago. or something like that. Maybe he says a long time ago, because years ago wouldn't make any sense, even in the context of the show. Anyway, but so at this point, Mabel, learns that about the lie. She's furious, and this, of course, times up with Dipper being furious with Seuss. Old Man McGucket is also there. But in the meantime, then we get, various action beats of, finding everything down there. Now, the design of everything in the cave is great. Like, just the way everything looks down there is very cool. It feels kind of epic for this show, honestly. Just the scale of the caves, all of these dinosaurs trapped in the amber, and the cool way that the sap is like dripped down onto them. And the idea that living creatures could get preserved in there was set up with the previous, the Irrational Treasure episode with the silly president. So all of that stuff is very cool. And there's a lot of good action beats that I'm not going to just go, belabor in in a lot of detail. But of course, by the end, we also already talked about Dipper and Seuss, but by the end, Stan has, actively put himself in danger to protect Waddles, and is able to return Waddles to Mabel, thus, regaining her favor and gaining forgiveness, and along the way, forming his own emotional bond with Waddles. And it's all just a very satisfying episode of TV. I like it. I like it. So that's that's pretty much this episode. But I'm actually excited to talk about the next episode next week, probably. I say probably only because I'm traveling to Korea again later today. And so, next week I'll be in Korea. But I think that my plan is still to do the rewatch. But the next episode starts moving towards the big season 1 finale. First part of a 2-parter for the finale, and it also introduces a character who really kind of becomes something amazing, that being Bill Cipher. And so I'll go ahead and leave it there, but I will talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes, although when exactly that will be is a little bit complicated, because I will, of course, be traveling for some time and then in Korea, so I will record another video at my next opportunity to do so, and I'll post it, and it will be from Korea, and I'll go ahead and leave it there, and I'll talk to you then for 5 more minutes.